Okay, welcome to the AdaptX podcast, where we have conversations with individuals who are building accessible businesses, advocating for inclusion, or excelling in adaptive sports. Our intention is never to speak on behalf of those with disabilities, but share insights to make a more accessible world. Today, we are joined by Amanda Sandoval and Bernie Tretta from the team that organizes the Houston Marathon. This past month, they celebrated their 10th anniversary of the programming, showcasing 5 categories: wheelchair, hand cycle, visually impaired, mobility impaired, and duos. The field started with 10 athletes in 2014 and grew to over 200 this year. And we'll discuss how they've had growth year over year in this division and the logistics that they consider when organizing the inclusive race. Amanda and Bernie, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
Maybe going back to 2014, were you both involved at that time?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
yes.
What were the initial reservations? Maybe the landscape in terms of inclusion and disability was definitely different 10 years ago. But what were the initial reservations of including athletes with disabilities in a race like the Houston Marathon?
So when I started it in 2010 was my first race. We already had some wheelchairs in the race participating, and as far as I knew, we didn't have any concerns with the number of people that were interested in participating. So it wasn't really a question of whether we should or shouldn't. It was just that was the demand at the time. But we tried to make sure that the streets were good for them to participate in race. The start line, we have them start, I believe it started where they were 15 minutes before the elites, and then we eventually became more and more efficient, and it's 10 minutes before the elites now. So those would be kind of the main ones, and then we created a path for them at the finish line for them to be able to exit out safely and be able to get back into their day chairs and then be able to follow through the rest of the finish line shoot. But I don't know if you have anything else to add, Bernie, from many years ago.
Yeah. I think our concerns were just not really knowing how to handle increasing the field safely.
What did you anticipate to be the biggest safety considerations in terms of that process?
At the start, everybody's packed in so closely and the streets are narrow. And so everybody starting at the same time is always a concern for the wheelchairs. Of course, for the runners, it's the other runners. But for the wheelchairs, that's a concern. And then on the course itself, turns, elites, water stops, the media vehicles trying to pass the slower, which aren't really slow at all, the slower of the wheelchairs that the elites have caught up to. And then, of course, the finish line, people come screaming into the finish line, and if volunteers or anybody is in the way, that could be an issue. So making sure you're coordinating something in each position.
Do you do any education prior to the event with volunteers and media trucks so they have an idea of what to expect?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
There's so much conversation with the course committee.
Yeah, so Bernie hosts several conversations prior to the event, and then race weekend she also holds a very large meeting with the athletes and guides to help educate them on what side of the road to stay on, what to pay attention to. And then on our end for the organization, as far as our course people, there's a lot of conversations that happen, a lot of meetings to know, they want to know how many are going to be on the course, what their pace times are, and stuff like that. And of course the pace vehicles are always a concern considering how close they can get to the athletes.
Yeah, absolutely.
The other thing that we have, which is slightly unique to Houston, is bike guides for every wheelchair hand cycle. And I'm not meaning the wheelchairs like the duos or the people that are in like the slower kind of sports chairs. I'm meaning the racing wheelchairs and the fast hand cycles. They're given a bicycle guide, and the bicycle guides go through a training as well with somebody that kind of straddles the course team and the volunteer team. And they get an extensive training on how to stay out of people's way and how to keep your person safe. So they've been given a guide that is kind of a proxy for us yelling at them and keeping them in the right spot.
Yeah, that's a great thing that I think really any local race could implement. Just having some volunteer bikers to go alongside athletes who either might need some assistance with directionals or who just safety considerations, I guess. So that's I guess one pretty easy recommendation, I guess, that maybe
It,
races could implement.
yeah, and it's actually really easy to implement. As our race has grown, we've always had the concern, could we get more bike guides? And they just fall out of the woodwork because
Mhm.
for a cyclist to be able to be on a closed course,
Mhm.
no traffic, just screaming as fast as they can to some degree with, and crowds cheering because everybody's out and they feel like they're, doing something special and rewarding and being seen for it. It's really, really easy to get bicycle guides.
Yeah.
And they just need a little bit of training. And then what ends up happening is they form these great friendships and partnerships. And so year after year, we see the same guides come back and guide the same athletes. And then they end up training with them throughout the year and attending other races with them. And
Awesome.
so, yeah, I think it's a very easy thing a race can do.
Yeah. Did you elicit feedback or insight from the athletes with disabilities in terms of what could make their experience better, what could make their experience safer?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, go ahead,
Yeah,
Amanda.
so we send out a participant survey to all participants following the race, and then I know that Bernie also surveys all of our organizations that we're involved with, and reaches out to the athletes as well. So there are quite a few places or ways for them to get back to us on their feedback each year.
Mhm.
One thing that we're working through in this kind of focus group that I'm a part of is the registration platform and the questions that get asked during registration, and how that can help the timing companies and the race director better understand their population. And so one of the things that we've been trying to figure out is, for example, as we try to add more categories, like if we want to add a neurodivergent category, not all participants who are diagnosed with a neurodivergence want to be recognized in that category. Some of them just want to be in the regular age group. Some of them would want to win that category. So it's been a tricky balance between expanding categories, but then also having enough participants to fill each category, so you're not winning like a 1 out of 1 category. So I guess my question is, you guys have 5 now. What did you
Mhm.
start with, and do you envision more being a part of it? Um,
So originally we started with wheelchairs. That was most prominent, and eventually we saw more and more participants that were interested in different divisions. So eventually we moved it and to include hand cycles, visually impaired, mobility impaired, and then finally the duo groups. And so we have found that this is quite a few participants, and every year it keeps growing organically, and word of mouth keeps having more and more participants come towards the Houston Marathon. We're definitely open to always being inclusive of all those that are interested, and doing our best to make sure that we can safely have them all on the course. We have had some neurodivergent, I would say, athletes that have reached out that do join the group so that they can have that support at the start and finish line.
Yeah, we've definitely had some, and none of them have requested to register specifically in a like neurodivergent or any other type of intellectual disability type group. But they have wanted the support. So what we've done is we've let them kind of join we have a separate corral for the AWD group. And so they've joined us there. And then, we have our own group of volunteers. And so we have the volunteers that make sure that they kind of find them after the race, and they can even run with a guide if they choose to. But yeah, and the very first one started because there was a younger person. She's a late teen, and her mother approached us and said like she had never done a marathon, never didn't really know anything about it. Her daughter had signed up and had been training, and then they show up and they were like, oh my God, we thought this was going to be like 1,000 people, and it's like 25,000 people. And she was completely overwhelmed. And so we were like, don't worry, we got her.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's kind of actually how it started. But yeah, we're open to it. We just haven't had much desire to expand beyond the 5 at this point.
Yeah, and it's also like during the registration process, do you ask participants what accommodations do you need? So you can anticipate those things beforehand, so you don't have a situation like that where if a team doesn't have as much support as a race like Houston does, and they're trying to run around and do all the race day activities, and then someone comes and says, "Wait, I need to be in a smaller group." Like, would you ask for accommodations or accessibility requirements during the registration process?
So right now, the registration, it does ask, if they want to participate in the Athletes with Disabilities program. It gives them the option of the 5 different disabilities. We do have in there, once they register, they have to add their guide if they're going to have one, or if they'd like to request for us to help match them with a guide. Of course, their estimated finish time, which is always important. And then emergency contacts, those types of things. And then if at the end, when they finish registering, it does pop up with our email address, so that if they have any additional questions, they can email us. And typically, if someone doesn't fall exactly into one of those 5 categories, they will email us with questions. And then Bernie typically will jump in and answer those and find the help that they might need or the assistance.
So what does mobility impaired consist of? Do you know, are there like specific diagnoses that can fit in that, or is it kind of loose?
We're pretty liberal with our categories. We aren't going to at this point, we don't require somebody to have doctor's proof or something like that.
Yeah.
But mobility impaired, about 95% of them are amputees, lower limb amputees. We have a woman with dwarfism that participates every year, and a couple people that have had spinal cord injuries. But that's the very, very large majority is amputees.
Yeah, perfect. Awesome. Can you tell us about maybe the efforts that you've had to take course-wise, so the physical environment of the course, to make it more accessible for wheelchairs, or do you just already have kind of a fortunate setup?
Yeah, so I'd say this year is probably the best start we've had, and every year Barney and I work with our start line and finish line team to try to make improvements, to make it more accessible, to make it easier for them. And what we did this year was we moved the corral from where we normally would have it, because we always had the challenges of the sidewalks and the turns for the larger racing wheelchairs and for the hand cycles. It could be very difficult to make a U-turn very quickly, especially sharp turns. And so this year we were able to move to a different space, which allowed for a lot more open space and a larger turn for them to be able to get to the start, and which I felt worked out really well. And kudos to our start line captain, as he was able to help. He worked through that with us for quite a while, trying to figure out, it's hard to figure out where to put different corrals when you have 27,000 people plus. And so that start made it a lot easier this year. And then, of course, there's always the quality of the streets in any city that you're running in. We try to make sure that as many of the potholes and barriers or anything that are along the course, we work with the city directly and try to make sure that's all ready for our participants. But you're always going to have something that, there's construction on the roads, there are narrow streets. And the way that we filter out our start line is kind of like a funnel, so that they're able to kind of start out and then they can fan out pretty quickly to get into the street and take off. So I think that we've come a long way, and that the challenges are still there, and they're always going to be there for the streets, and there's always construction. It's Houston. And so I do believe that this year was probably the best year we've had for as far as the start in the course. If you have anything else.
I agree, and it was the smoothest year we've had. But then, additionally, one of the things that we do is the day before the race, we have a mandatory athlete meeting, and
Mhm.
in that meeting, all athletes with disabilities and their guides attend, and the bike guides have one right before it. And we go over any potential hazards that are on the course, whether they are all part of the course, like a U-turn, or whether it's some sort of construction or something that has popped up, like they added bike lanes in certain parts of the city, and
Mhm.
there are these bumps in the bike lane. They call them armadillos, which is so Texas,
Mhm.
but they are a major hazard and for a wheelchair. So we point out things like there's going to be at this point there's going to be a very sharp U-turn, and we will have a sign so you're aware of it and your bike guide is aware of it, but you need to be aware of it too. And then there's a very sharp right-hand turn at one point, and we have a sign. We have a person that like stands out there with a sign. So there are things that we also notify them of for safety, and we remind them don't run over people, really obvious things.
Mhm.
But um, yeah.
Have you had any success partnering with organizations that serve people with disabilities to kind of get their members involved in the event?
Oh, absolutely. That's how we
Mhm.
got started. But yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Um, I at the point in time that we started this program, I was the director of the Houston chapter of Achilles International,
Okay.
which is a nonprofit that helps people with disabilities stay active. And that's how we approached the Houston Marathon, because quite a few of them wanted to participate, but we didn't. There wasn't really categories and divisions for them that they felt like they'd be seen. So that's how we started the program. And so then that at that point, it was really the only nonprofit kind of operating in that space. And since then, there are more nonprofits that have formed. And as they form, we snatch them up and say, hey, don't you want to participate? Wouldn't it be fun? Can't you
Yeah.
volunteer? So yeah,
Yeah.
we get them very involved, whether they
Yeah.
like it or not.
Yeah, we had Achilles at our race this past year,
Mhm.
and we will this spring as well. And we'll have the Boston chapter's president on the podcast in a couple weeks as well, Joe
Yeah,
Lamar.
great.
But how do you ensure that the facilities, are there bathrooms that are accessible? Like, what are the other, just if someone's organizing a race, what are kind of those smaller details that they should be aware of just in making the whole experience accessible?
Well, definitely the porta cans. We make sure we have ADA porta cans at all the medical stations along the course. We do have to keep reminding our our vendors to drop them in the proper place so that they are accessible for them off of curbs. Uh, and then we have them in the start line corral in their corral before they go out, and also in the George R. Brown Convention Center where we have our pre and post race. And then another thing that we do is educate the open field runners also. We want to make sure that they're aware of these athletes that are on the course and what they should or shouldn't be doing as they're passing each other along the course, and make sure that it's well known and that it is communicated in our social channels and our athlete guide, our website, those types of places, so that people are aware that they need to be on the lookout and be safe. Our guides have bibs on their back that say who they're guiding. A lot of the guides for the blind athletes are tethered, at least, or one of the guides is tethered to the athlete. So just kind of some knowledge, I believe, is also key to having starting a race with inclusive and trying to make sure everyone's educated.
Mhm. Yeah. Additionally, just some little touches and things that we do. We offer wheelchair and hand cycle drop off for anybody that has wheels. They can drop their wheels off the day before. So we have that mandatory meeting. So they pick up their packets and they go to this meeting, and they have parking available for that. And then they can drop off their wheelchair or hand cycle. So the next morning they don't have to deal with getting it there and figuring that out in the morning. So it's already sitting there waiting for them. And when they come into the convention center, so we have a pen, a locked pen where we store everything. And then we get there, me and my second in command, Andrew, get there at like 4:30 in the morning and open this pen and put everything out. So everybody has their stuff ready for them when they get there first thing in the morning. So we call it wheelchair valet, but we have the opportunity for them to do that and parking with it. We have a dedicated batch of volunteers. So those people can, and about 50% of our volunteers are family members. Sometimes those family members aren't even participating anymore, and they are still continuing to volunteer. But we have these volunteers, and so they help everybody do everything that they need at the beginning of the race, getting to the start line, transferring, getting their stuff, because we have a dedicated bag drop as well. Since we actually start before the bag drop opens, or we leave the convention center before the bag drop for the open runners even opens, we have wagons and all kinds of stuff so that they can have the things that they need at the starting line, transfer, maybe into their wheelchair or hand cycle, and then we bring their day chair or their regular day leg or whatever it is back to the convention center for their bag drop. So we have all these volunteers doing this, and then after the race, they have a volunteer waiting for them so that they can guide them through, get them their ice cream sandwiches and their medals and all their things after the race too.
So having like a adaptive athlete liaison sort of thing is probably another volunteer role that really any
we
race
just call
could.
them volunteers, but
Yeah, but like having,
Mhm.
like you said, someone designated to
Yeah.
that population could be an easy thing that a race
Yeah.
could have, just as they try to accommodate more people with disabilities.
Absolutely.
And another thing in terms of safety, and I don't know how other races work in their medical department, but generally, if a person has a medical need and goes to the medical tent, whether it's on course or they're back at their finish line or whatever, usually family, friends are not allowed in that medic tent with them because it's just too many people. There's somebody that tends to be freaking out. And we say that if they're an athlete with disability, their guide or family member needs to be there with them, because you often have you can have somebody that's nonverbal, somebody that's deaf, somebody that's blind, whatever it is, and they aren't easily able to communicate. So you need that guide to act as a bit of a translator for them. And so we do say that if they are an athlete with a disability, you need to have their guide or a family member in there with them. They should not be in there alone.
Absolutely. Any memorable moments or success stories over the last 5 to 10 years that really stand out to you, that kind of encompasses the inclusivity of the race? Yeah.
I don't know if I have one in particular that stands out, but my favorite part of race day is always the athletes with disabilities start. That's where I start in the morning. I don't miss it. I love to watch them take off. They're the first athletes to take off, our wheelchairs and hand cyclists. And I don't know, it's just a very emotional morning. I mean, you've worked all year to make sure that all of these athletes feel just as special as anyone else on the course, and that they're able to participate. And it's just a really big deal once they're all gone. I'm sure, once they take off, then the elites, and then between the A and B and B and C corrals is when the rest of the athletes take off in between the corrals. For safety reasons, we want to make sure they have plenty of space and time to catch up and take off. And once they're gone, it's okay. Now it's Bernie's turn to jump out on the course. So I don't know if you know, but Bernie runs the marathon every year.
Sure. That's awesome.
And so it's just like a really good time for us to just kind of soak in that moment. Like, okay, we did this. All these athletes are out there. They're on the course, and it's just a very happy, excited feeling that you've done something to help
Yeah.
them get out there. And for me, every year, that's just my favorite part of the race. And we get Bernie ready. She's getting ready to jump on the course. We give her hugs and she takes off. So, and
Mhm.
then the rest is just, and then I jump into the rest of my day. But that's for me every year. It's the highlight for sure. I
It,
don't know if you
it,
have
it
a
is,
particular moment. This year was pretty exciting with the 10-year anniversary.
yeah. One of my memories that sticks is, so the national anthem used to be sung in
Mhm.
between the AWD start and the elite start. So the wheelchairs would start, they'd sing the national anthem, and the elites would start. That way, it had something to do with broadcasts, like the broadcast timing or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But so many of the athletes with disabilities are veterans, and they didn't get to see the national anthem being sung. And the woman that sings the national anthem can't sing it twice because her voice is saved for that. So we would sing it ourselves, and I am a terrible, terrible singer. But we would stand there, and the whole group would be singing, and sometimes the elites would stop and sometimes they would sing. And so there was a really cool year where we were singing and all of the elites stopped, and they were like, "Where's the flag?" Even and we had like a little like wavy flag that somebody had on their wheelchair. And it was just a neat moment where we just really felt like a cohesive group, you know, badly singing the national anthem. So,
Yeah, Houston attracts a lot of elites because of the course, correct?
mhm, yeah.
Yes, fast and
Yeah.
flat.
Now the national anthem is sung right before, before
Perfect.
the wheelchairs take off. So, yeah.
It's awesome. Yeah, hopefully, I would love to get out there someday to run with Jacob there. Seems like it would be a good course for a wheelchair duo.
Yeah.
What are some things that race directors could do outside of maybe some of the things that we've already talked about, just to make their events more inclusive or accessible? If someone doesn't have any athletes with disabilities currently participating in their races, or maybe they do, but they're not aware of it. What are maybe one or two easy steps that they can take in kind of the process of being more inclusive?
Well, Bernie and I kind of talked about this, and number one is definitely listen to the athletes. If we reach out, if anyone reaches out to us and we listen to what their needs are, or what suggestions they have, and we want to do everything we can that we are capable of doing on the city streets, we definitely want to do that for them. I think it might be a misconception that they want special treatment or that they require certain things that maybe other athletes don't. I think they just want to be able to have the accessibility to get where they need to get, have the support that they might need from us as a team. Like Bernie said, we can't do this without our volunteers. We have so many great volunteers that help with the race itself. And it's a really special group of volunteers that come in and help these athletes with disabilities, and they're so patient with them and so kind. And I just think that's, to me, listen to the athletes, and having really great volunteers are definitely key to having the field. But it is possible, and just with a little extra work and time into it, it doesn't take too much, to be able to get that started, especially if you're starting out with a smaller field. But as we've said, we started out small and we keep getting larger and larger. So it's just, we need more and more volunteers.
Do you think there's a limit in terms of how many you could accommodate?
Yeah.
I think eventually we are gonna hit that. We had 147 athletes this year, which is a lot. And Bernie and Andrew are two people that have a lot of work ahead of them to help accommodate and coordinate and match them with guides. I know matching them with guides, which Bernie is definitely the expert in that, can be difficult, especially if they're really fast. And we do have a cap on our duos and our wheelchair and hand cycle divisions, to make sure that we can safely have them take off at the start, and then also along the course, as they can be so close to the elite athletes too, and just making sure they have enough space and area for them to get through. The mobility impaired, sometimes with their amputations, they tend to oscillate. Just making sure that there's enough room. Blind athletes with their guides that are tethered to them, you want to have space for people to go around them. So I think for us, it's just a safety issue, and to make sure that they are safe and that everyone else on the course is safe as well.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we do everything we can. We have a separate corral, and we have ultimately 3 starts for all of the athletes, but at some point we're literally going to run out of physical space, because 147 athletes, 45 of them were wheelchairs, but then everybody else, that 147 is multiplied by 2 more because you've got guides for each of them, either 1 or 2 guides for people. So that's a lot of human bodies in one space, all starting at the same time. And so yeah, at some point we're gonna run up against the wall of it. It's just not safe to start that many people at once, and we don't want them starting with the masses, but they become the masses at some point. So I don't want to think that we'll ever have a cap, but yeah.
I wonder if it could be just the addition of a corral, and I can't even pretend to understand the logistics of organizing a race with nearly 30,000 people, but I wonder if it could just go like hand cycles and push rim, and then 5 minute later duos and mobility impairments, and then elites, etc. as it gets bigger. But obviously I have a vested interest in trying to get more duos involved in these races, but it's always easier for people to run around us than it is for us to run around people. So that's where I like to start before, or start at least start in the front. It's easy for me to assume that some of this stuff is common knowledge, and probably the same for you guys as well. It seems like it's so obvious to articulate some of these things, but unless you've been in the space, there might be things that you haven't considered yet. So just, I guess, maybe encouraging race directors to think through their process. Like, if I can't see, could someone navigate everything that I offer? If I can't hear, can they navigate? Like, if they're using a wheelchair, can they get through the whole process? Just as like a thought experiment to see if you have any physical or cognitive barriers, or the way that information is presented. So it's just,
I think something too that's really great about our industry is that we share things with each other. We have a lot of conferences where we have the ability to go learn from other races and vice versa. And I think those open communications with other race directors, with other, organizations with the different divisions, have the ability to go and learn and see how others are doing it. What's working, what's not, what could be better. And there's always a thirst of learning more and gaining that knowledge. And Bernie and I have both done that individually with different races, and had conversations and talked to all the different races, including Boston and New York, and a lot of the majors, and then also races that are closer to our size. So it is really helpful to have that connection and communication with other races.
And the other thing I would add is there's plenty of races that don't have 20,000 people, whose race directors aren't attending big conferences. But if they have groups like Achilles or Ainsley's Angels, or any group that is in their area that is wanting to participate, reach out to them. Many of those people have participated in numerous races and can help the race director say, at least they could articulate what they need if the race director can't understand it. And that's definitely something that I've done in Houston, again, with Achilles, like reaching out to various races. Like we, obviously heavily partnered with the Houston Marathon, but there were plenty of other races that people wanted to participate in, and we would just approach them and say, can we do this? This is how, or this is what we need. And they'd be like, I guess, sure. So some of it is that they don't even know there's a need. And if they know there's a need, they're not quite sure how to get there. So maybe those race directors just need to ask the question of those nonprofits or of those people.
Yeah.
But they're great.
Like Amanda mentioned, that it's essential to listen to the feedback of the athletes, but there's also the step to getting the athletes, and sometimes I think they do have to be like directly recruited to a degree because they might assume that
Yes.
the race isn't for them unless they're invited to it. Just because they've
Mhm.
probably been conditioned to assume that there's a lot of environments that aren't suited to them unless
Mhm.
they're invited to it. So maybe it is a concerted effort by a race director to invite an organization like Achilles to participate in their race. And once you invite them, you better make sure you understand what they need
Yes.
after you do. So, no, one of my friends participated in Houston last month, and he's done a bunch of majors, and he said it was the best race he's ever been at. So, you guys are obviously doing something great. So, it was good to share the story and just kind of share what you guys have learned over the last 10 years of running probably one of the most inclusive marathons in the world, maybe. What are other good examples of inclusive marathons, or do you identify other ones that have large adaptive fields?
Well, I guess it all depends because there's variations of it. So, Boston has and London have huge wheelchair contingencies, well beyond
Hmm.
what we have. Um, and there were other races that have much larger blind divisions. Like CIM used to have a huge, like they used to be the blind national championships. Um, but yeah, as far as all disabilities, I think it's total head count. Again, the majors probably have more than us. But for a race our size, I think maybe Marine Corps
Yeah,
might be
that
the
was one
only
that
one
came to
that's
mind. Yeah,
bigger. Mhm.
yeah, that was one that came to mind. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's good that they're getting more presence. They're getting more representation and screen time. Obviously, even at the Paralympic level, they're starting to get more
Yeah.
televised coverage as well. So the more that we can demonstrate that they're welcome and successful in races, I hope the more will participate. So, well, Amanda and Bernie, thanks for taking the time to talk through the process that you guys went through. Hopefully, it benefits race directors and people that are passionate about endurance sports to maybe either become a guide or learn to love how supporting someone and their participation can be equally rewarding to PRing individually. I think for me, it's been incredibly rewarding running with the Hoyts. So,
Thank you for having us, and thank you for all that you're doing to help this field and division and help it grow. We really appreciate it, and I'm sure the athletes do too.
We're always here if people have questions. So,
yeah, we'll
Absolutely.
we'll include emails and links to the Houston races in the show notes
Please
that they can
yeah,
do.
reach out to. So,
yeah,
awesome.
come run or
Thanks
roll
again.
Houston with us.
Thank you for listening to the AdaptX podcast. Our effort to amplify the ideas of our guests and create more inclusive and accessible industries is futile unless these episodes reach a larger audience. If you enjoyed our discussion today, please leave us a rating or a review on whichever platform you use. And if you would like to learn more about AdaptX, the course that we teach to health and fitness professionals and the projects that our organization is working on, you can subscribe to our newsletter through our website, www.adaptx.org. Until next Monday.